Good afternoon, everybody. As already told that this is a substitute presentation, so I'll not be making a formal presentation, but I'll just share what we are doing as part of National Smart Grid Mission. To give my introduction, I am Kumud Wadhwa, working as Senior General Manager in Power Grid Corporation as part of National Smart Grid Mission team, which is supporting Ministry of Power for rollout of smart grids with specific focus in distribution. So way back in 2012, there was a decision from government side that we need to constitute few bodies who can take up this role of rollout of smart grids in Indian scenario, because India was a part of ISGAN as a founding member. ISGAN is an international smart grid action network wherein around 24 countries collaborate to design and promote policy initiatives for promoting smart grids for carbon emission reduction. So India is also one of the founding members. So in 2012, two bodies were constituted. One was India Smart Grid Task Force, which was an interministerial body only, because smart grid will be cutting across the whole value chain, starting from generation, distribution, and transmission, and the end consumer deployments as well. So interministerial body was India Smart Grid Task Force, and there was a PPP body, which is India Smart Grid Forum. So India Smart Grid Forum was to facilitate dialogue between the technology solution providers and government bodies so as to know what all technologies are available which can be useful for deployment in our scenario. And in India Smart Grid Task Force, because Power Grid is one of the pioneer transmission utility, as we all know, long back, decades back, we deployed SCADA systems, and now we have gone ahead with deployment of VAMs as well, which is further second level of grid monitoring solutions. So because of its reputation, Power Grid was given the role of managing the India Smart Grid Task Force Secretariat, and I was part of that team itself. I am an electrical engineer with an MBA with specialization in information systems. So I was also part of that India Smart Grid Task Force team, and as part of that team, we designed and developed the roadmap for smart grids, which was launched in 2013. So in that roadmap, the vision for smart grid was defined as we need to transform the Indian power sector into a secure, adaptive, sustainable, and digitally enabled ecosystem that provides reliable and quality energy for all with active participation of stakeholders. So the vision and mission were very carefully articulated that time. Now, if we need to transform the Indian power sector into a digitally enabled ecosystem for quality energy supply, so what were the challenges at that stage? The main challenge was that DISCOM was the weakest link in the whole power sector value chain, because lot of losses were there in that change, and the aggregate losses were to the tune of 2.8 lakh crore rupees. Even today, the losses are high, but the level has come down to around 18 to 20%. So how we can really use technology to improvise the condition of such utilities which are facing cash crunch as well. So for improvising any situation, first we need to control the situation, and to control the situation, we need to have measuring things. So maybe we had to kind of take the SCADA systems from transmission grid down to the consumer level, because IT implementation was also there as part of IPDS system, wherein the transformer meters were deployed, so we were having certain data available from the transformers. But the next level would have been obviously that we take it to the end consumer level, wherein we start monitoring what is the end consumer's consumption, and then start taking some corrective actions based on the actual scenarios. So Government of India at that time decided that we should take up 14 pilot projects, smart grid pilot projects, with 50% funding from Ministry of Power, Government of India. So those 14 pilot projects were spread all across India, and most of the pilot projects are now completed and have started giving results also. I'll be sharing some of the benefits that have been realized from those pilots. And from that task force scenario, in 2015, it was decided now we need to take up smart grids as a mission mode, and that is how this National Smart Grid Mission was constituted, and the task force secretariat was culminated into that National Smart Grid Mission. So under that National Smart Grid Mission, again 30% of funding is available for the DISCOMs to propose smart grid projects which can have AMI deployment, which can have infrastructure for EV charging facilitation, which can support renewable integration, because all these things are going to change this power sector ecosystem in a big way. And in fact, the vision was on a functional basis also that we need to transform the power sector in a similar manner the transformation happened in the telecom world. Decades back in telecom world, there was a monopolistic service provider, and the consumers were not getting quality service. They were not getting service altogether. So there was a mandate, why not we replicate, and today the telecom sector is totally digitally enabled. There are a number of service providers, the business is viable. Many service providers are giving calls to all consumers day and night. You change your plan and you take our services. So the scenario has there has been digital disruption in the telecom sector. So why not to have that kind of digital disruption in DISCOM sector as well? And our power minister has recently announced that consumers will be given a choice. There will be multiple franchisee operating in one single region now, and then the consumer may choose from getting the supply from any of the franchises, which will promote competition as well. But again, to make that thing viable, the cash register of the utility is to improvise. So for that, the pilots envisaged that maybe we need smart metering infrastructure. That was the core component of most of the pilots at that time. So how these smart meters help? The smart meters will measure the data and send it on a periodic basis to the utility. So utility can check whether the consumption is as per the sanctioned load or there is some violation. So all such functions were there. Some of the benefits that are realized in one or two pilots I'll be sharing. If we take up the example of deployments in Mysore, CSE Mysore, wherein around 21,000 smart meters were deployed, the benefits basically fall into faster realization of dues. How? Because smart meters facilitate remote connection and disconnection, so if anybody is not making timely payment, the utility can remotely disconnect their supply, and as and when the payments are received, the meter is again connected remotely. So this gave a boost in collection of past dues. So this was one of the major benefits that we realized. Then again, the utility was able to take up that load forecasting function. The load forecasting that was done based on the actual smart meter data was very accurate, and then that can maybe if replicated for the whole utility level, because this was only a pilot outcome. If it can be replicated for the utility level, the load forecasting can help in better portfolio management for the utility. The next benefit that was realized was that they could identify which of their assets are overloaded, which of the transformers are overloaded, or which of the transformers are not being utilized to their optimal capacity. So in fact, they managed to remove one of the distribution transformers for service and deploy it in some other area, and that was a deferred capital expenditure scenario, because the current utilization of that transformer was only 25%, which is way below the normal optimal utilization of the transformer. So these were some of the pilot benefits that we realized for Mysore. Again, there was a pilot deployment at Ajmer, and the benefits there that were realized there were, the utility could identify faulty meters. There were certain meters which were not recording the consumption when there was a power interruption. So because in India, we have that kind of scenario quite frequently happening, wherein the consumer supply will get disrupted because of system constraints or some faults in the system. So when the power was getting interrupted, the meter will simply go into a hang state, and the power gets interrupted and is then restored. But the power gets restored, the meters still remain in the hanged state. They will not start recording the consumption even when the power gets restored. So this was a faulty meter scenario. So they could identify that such faulty meters are there in the grid, and then they could easily replace those faulty meters so that no consumption is without the recording. So that was one big kind of saving for the utility. Again, they could figure out, because there are certain capacity charges also to be paid by the end consumer based on the sanctioned load. So most of the consumers deployed their meters long back, and the sanctioned load was only to the range of 2 kilowatt, 3 kilowatt, or 5 kilowatt. But based on the actual meter readings, they found, though the sanctioned load is 2 kilowatt, the actual consumption is maybe 8 kilowatt also most of the time. So they were not paying the capacity charges. So they were giving warnings to such consumers to enhance their sanctioned load limit and then get extra cash based on the capacity charges which were due to the utility. Then there is one scenario wherein, in current scenario, if a meter is faulty, even though the consumer and the utility will know that the meter has gone faulty only maybe after 2 months have passed, because our meter reader will come only once in 2 months. So after 2 months, if I get to know that meter has gone faulty, I will be taking another 1 month or 15 days for replacing that faulty meter. So during that period, the consumption is charged on an average basis. So that average consumption charges are again a nuisance for end consumer as well as a loss for the utility, because that average consumption charges may be based on the past consumption, which was on a different seasonal consumption, whereas the meter failed normally during peak load conditions when the summers are there. So that kind of faulty meter scenarios were also identified on almost near real time, and faster replacement of such faulty meters again resulted into benefits to the utility and a higher satisfaction for the consumer, because the consumer did not need, there was no need for that end consumer to go to the utility office multiple times, taking leave from office and trying to settle that faulty meter kind of bill. So that was the satisfaction that the consumer got. So these were certain benefits that they realized. Again, the billing cycle period reduced by around 15-20 days. So again, that was a saving, because if we are able to whatever in the cash flow cycle, the DISCOM has to pay upfront to the generating companies for the power which is purchased. As per the recent mandate, now the DISCOMs are to open letter of credit for making the payments to the DISCOM, because if to the generating companies. Because if DISCOMs do not pay to the generating companies on time, the generating companies are not able to pay to the coal suppliers on time. And then if the coal supply is interrupted, the power generation will not be to the level it is required, and there will be stranded assets, and in turn DISCOMs will not get the power for serving the consumer on 24/7 basis. So it is very important that DISCOMs make timely payment. So as per the recent regulations, now DISCOMs are to open letter of credit and make immediate payments to the generating companies. But DISCOM will be selling to the end consumer today and will be realizing the revenue after 2 months. That is the billing cycle period. So how they are going to manage this deferred cash flow realization? So for that, there is now a mandate from government side that utilities will be deploying prepaid smart metering. So prepaid smart metering for all is to be provided maybe in next 3 years. Though it is a very ambitious target, but people are trying to figure it out how to really go for prepaid smart metering, so that that cash flow is also similar to the other services in the sector. So these are some of the kind of benefits that we realized. But also there were certain challenges which we came across while we did those pilot deployments. One of the challenges that we faced was that the communication was not really reliable, and the data availability was not to the extent it is required, or it was proposed as part of service level agreements. So how we can improve the reliability and availability performance of communication is one open challenge that we are facing. Maybe globally, what is the communication experience? Because backhaul is dependent on the telecom service providers. And sometimes there are pockets where the signal is not there and the data communication is not there for certain periods of the days. Technology is changing, evolving, and maybe there will be better versions of technology which will address this issue in near future, we are expecting. Another challenge that we are facing even today is that the smart meter deployment is not interoperable as of now. We are dependent on the communication service provider. So if there are 3 models of smart meters which are to be procured by the utility, all those 3 smart meters should have communication service provider, which is a single communication service provider, so that they need not to replicate the communication infrastructure. So this dependence on that communication service provider is almost kind of a monopolistic situation, which utilities are not convinced that they should get into, because the consumers will expand. Though even in Mysore we have deployed on 14 feeders, 20,000 meters, but now because of consumer growth, there are certain new consumers on those feeders, and if we need to give those new consumers the smart meters, if we go back to the same smart meter vendor, then they may charge different price, which is not as per the market price. And we will not be able to get a different supplier, because that different meter will not be interoperable with the communication infrastructure deployed. So the need is that we have interoperability in ICT deployment. When I send an email, whether that email is received on a Wi-Fi link or on a LAN environment or a WAN environment, it is not dependent on the communication media that I get to open that email and read it on my mobile or my laptop or my computer. So I have that interoperability in the ICT world. But whether we can adapt that level of interoperability from that ICT world to our OT world and have similar solutions for smart meters, wherein the smart meters also become interoperable, because ultimately the OT part also is creating that data packet only. So once that data packet is created based on certain standard protocols, it should be, the communication pipe should be transparent, and the data packet should be read in the data center, irrespective of the communication pipe or communication service provider who has supplied the communication technology. So these 2-3 challenges are certain things which are hampering the pace of smart meter rollout for better management of Indian distribution grid. I think with this the time is out, and I'll take kind of leave. Maybe if there are questions we can take after some time.
Thank you so much.